for things that are very I/O bound, meaning you have long database calls or even just database calls. This works pretty well. Or long file operations where you're copying things to disk or doing things. Node.js works really well in this kind of case. Now, is it good enough for all websites in the world? Really, the question is it good enough for you? Is this something that you want to build just a normal website in? It actually is going to work quite well for most normal websites. So if you want to write everything in JavaScript, it would be a pretty good choice. Now, some other things about Node is it's actually really small. So if you look at the Node documentation, about the Node API, this is the core of what comes with Node. This is basically everything, all right? I like to think of it, it has utilities, stuff for talking to files, and stuff for talking to the network. The network being, okay, you can make TCP calls, or you can of course go out to make database calls, or you can of course make web calls, or basically be a web server. And then there's some other utilities messed in with it. That's basically Node. Now, if you come from where I come from, which is a .NET background, the .NET framework is huge. It has a whole lot more than just networking and utilities. It's absolutely massive. Node takes a very different approach to things and stays intentionally very small. And the idea would be, okay, instead of us being really huge, we're going to be small and let the community make bunches of little libraries to add on. And so when you use things like what we're going to use today, Express or Restify, you'll see those libraries use bunches of different little bitty libraries to accomplish what they want, because they are much more along that Unix philosophy of make small things work really well instead of making very large things. So that's Node. It's small by default, and then you add on. If you're a Ruby person, well, the two Ruby people, it's do you do Rails or you do Sinatra? If you like small by default and you build up, you do Sinatra. If you like big, you go Rails. .NET, well, all of .NET's big. If you don't do things for yourself, just enough. So that's the basic idea in terms of Node. Now let's see some Node in action. Oh, wait a minute. Before we do that, installing Node. It's really very simple. If you're on the Mac and you're a Homebrew user, you can just install Node with Homebrew. It's really easy. Or you can just install and then an installer there. It'll get that on your computer. If you're on a PC, it's the same thing. It installs it very easily. It's not very invasive to your registry, so you don't have to worry about that. Probably all it's going to do is add something to your path, so you can call Node just about anywhere. So here we go. In terms of the code, I'm going to check in everything to my GitHub project. This is something that's public on GitHub. All the presentations I do, so all the code that we're working on today will be in that folder, so you can go download it if you want to later. Okay? Check it out. So let's start with one basic file. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth. I hope this doesn't get disorienting. I've got Sublime text here. This is where we're going to be doing all our text work. I've got a shell here. This is where we're going to be running, executing our Node code. And a browser, because we're going to be hitting the browser quite a bit throughout our time. And also, let's go ahead and open up Charles. Charles is a button proxy. It's pretty useful. We'll put him there. Wow, I can't see my console at all. There it is. Perfect. Okay, first of all, basic JS. Now I have Node installed, which means Node is in my path, so I can go here. And I'm going to come here, and because I'm not used to working on a white screen, I'm going to wait. This isn't where I'm going, and I'm going to think I'm on a web page. Okay, let's do something easy. Well, let's open that file. Presentations. There we go. Basic JS. Console.log. Hello. Now, if you've done JavaScript, and apparently all of you have except for one person, you're used to the console statement, right? It's very handy. It's used for debugging, putting things in the console so you can see them. If you want to execute arbitrary JavaScript on your computer, you do this: Node basic JS. Okay? And whatever you've done in that JavaScript file is now going to be executed by Node. And so I'm talking to the console, so it's going to write out hello, which is there. Of course, I missed the classic opportunity to do hello world, but oh well. Now let's do something a little bit more useful than that. Anybody ever do any sort of text processing? Got to deal with a file, do some stuff. So if you look at the Node API documentation, Node.js, Node docs, there is a file system for the documentation. There's all sorts of things that you can do. You can change permissions on various files. You can rename files. You can read files. That's what we're going to do. We're going to read a file. And you'll see a lot of pairs in here. And this will give you a really good idea into what's interesting about Node. Look at this read file versus read file sync method. By default, everything in Node that is going to touch the network, that is going to really cause blocking I/O kind of work, is going to be, by default, asynchronous. Okay? FS, being the module for file system, for reading file, is by default asynchronous. And so you're going to pass in a file name, options if you want to, and we're about to do that. And you pass in a callback. When the file is done reading, it then calls the callback, which means in between the time when you call the method and when the file is done reading, the Node process can then pick up any further requests that come along. Or, if you choose to do so, you can do a read file sync. Sync meaning not async, which means it's actually going to block, read the file, and get you the contents back. So if we look here, we could say, let's bring in the file system module. This is how you do it in Node. These modules are built in, so you don't have to do any packaging, and we'll talk about how you get third-party packages here in a minute. You can just say require FS, FS being the name for the file system stuff. Now we need a file that we can read. So let's do this. Let's go to Project Gutenberg. First book, plain text. Scroll down a ways. Here we go. Here's some text. All right. Create a new file. Let's paste this in. My goodness. That looks a little bit better. All right. Let's call this this text.text, which is a fantastic name. So here's our text. We want to read this text. Of course, we're going to do it with JavaScript. So we're going to say fs.read file sync text.txt. I'm going to pass in some options because I want to tell it what encoding to use. So encoding TF8. All right. And then since this is sync, we're done. Say var stuff. Console.log stuff. So that's how you can execute JavaScript and start messing with a file. So that's how you get the text. So we can take this text and we can say, you know what? Let's break this into some paragraphs. So we can say var stuff array equals stuff split. Let's split this by /ns. Two of them. I believe there's doubles. And let's see what we got. All right. So, did I use the wrong type again? No, that was right. Let's go back and look at that. How long is our array? Okay, that's correct. All right, so we're good. How many paragraphs do we have? We have 4 paragraphs. We're good. All right. So now what we can do is we can say let's turn this into HTML. Say then stuff array for each. You guys, I'm sure, are familiar with this. Yeah. We're going to say output plus or equal. And we have our cool HTML making engine here. Because who wouldn't want to do this? The reality is, when you do need to do this stuff, it's nice to be able to use a language that you know. And if you know JavaScript, it's a good choice. Well, let's go ahead and put in some more new lines. And then we got HTML. Okay? So that's using Node outside of the web server context. You can do a lot with this. You can do a file watcher. So if you want to know when some files change and you want to do some sort of network activity, call it database, blah, 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 Node can be used for that kind of thing. You can write files. I can take this and write this out to a file, which is actually really easy. You can just do write file sync, if I recall, see if this works in text. Let's pass in our output, and without looking at the documentation, well, this works. It's wrong key. It's because I'm in the wrong window. So there's that text that we got. All right. Now, generally, when you're going to do Node, you're not going to be doing it on the file system. So let's get a little bit of a taste of what that's going to look like. When you're not doing it on the file system, usually what you're going to be using is Node in its default async mode, and therefore default async pattern. So instead of using read file sync, you're going to do read file, which is, whenever it's done, actually going to call a callback. So let's leave that console log there. Let's run this. So our first console log is what? You've got this one that is console logging out the data, and this one that is console logging out stuff. The first one you actually have is the one that's logging out stuff, which is undefined. Whenever you're doing an async method, it's not going to be returning back the data from the function call. Well, the reason why is it's not executing synchronously. It can't return you that data. It's going to call the callback when it's actually done getting the data. So that's why this happens. What happens whenever this runs is it executes read file and sends in the function for the callback to say, call this when you get done, then immediately moves on, and it executes this. This is why you see the undefined first. Then, when it's done reading the file, which isn't very long, but in computer time is quite a bit longer than just the small bit amount of time it takes to get to that next line. And so console log for the data is going to be happening later. Does this workflow make sense? You've done JavaScript and you want to do an API call with jQuery or something, you do button click, that's synchronous, but the callback to get the data is not synchronous. That's going to come back asynchronously. It's the same basic idea. Imagine here that asynchronous jQuery call is actually just basically anything that's going to require some file I/O or network I/O, and therefore slow runtime down. Yes?
What's the concept of a rendezvous point, or a method of waiting for something to come back? Let's say you've got 3 or 4 things going on in parallel.
So you don't, okay, with Node, things don't generally happen in parallel because it's single threaded, right? And so if you were to wait and say, okay, go get this file and wait, well, that's actually doing read file sync, and it's going to be halting the thread. And so any other requests that come during that time are basically going to be stuffed. They're not going to be serviced by the execution context.
So you could actually hold up something else by doing that.
Yeah, because it's single threaded. Now, if you've done large-scale websites, I work on a very large-scale website, single-threaded does seem somewhat limiting. And for us, it would be, putting a node process for a single node process on a web server for a high traffic website is probably not an optimal use of your web server resources. They've got some built-in things for actually running multiple node processes, or if you're in the Windows world, you can host multiple node instances in IES and whatnot. And so generally what you're going to want in that kind of situation is actually multiple nodes running on a single server within a website. Now, that may not necessarily be the case, but at least that's how I would do it. .NET is definitely the very opposite of this. .NET is very much a multiple threads model. Have that thread sometimes, wait for stuff. Very much not a node approach. Anyway, so it's single threaded. So you don't wait, because if you wait, you halt everything. And so that's why, as a general rule, what you're going to want to do is this read file, not read file async, or various other asynchronous. Okay? This takes a little getting used to, and you're going to see this pattern quite a bit in Node. Okay, so I'm not going to go through basically what you would do at this point if you wanted to then do our processing asynchronously, which we can do because we can just basically copy this in here. Now, after the file has been read from disk, then you're going to split the file, get the link, and then it's going to build that, and then it's going to do a console. Oh, look at that. Well, I changed my variable name, so I can't just do stuff in the No, we're probably good. That's right. So this first undefined here at the bottom, that's this console log that happened after this callback is off, gone, and waiting. The second thing is the for, which is now you're in the callback, and this is the length here. And the third thing is the done message saying that we're done. Okay. So that's basically how to use Node in a non-web context, and a little bit about synchronous versus asynchronous in Node. By default, this is what you're going to be doing with Node, not the other, because it is a single-threaded process. Okay, so let's move on to something else. Let's create a very, very basic web server. Okay? And we're going to use what we were doing with a file server. Look at this. We'll call this basic server.js. All right? By and large, whenever you're going to build your nice enterprise-size major web 3.0 website, this is not exactly what you're going to do, but we're going to do this as a learning exercise. So once again, we're going to get the file system library. Okay? So what we want to do is whenever a request comes in, we're going to want to read a file off of disk. Actually, we'll come back to that. Let's create a server. Okay? The HTTP module is basically for doing things that are HTTP related. You create it by doing this. Anybody want to guess what rec and res mean? Request and response. All right, let's do this. That defines our server right there. Not much to it. We're going to say server.listen. Somebody pick a port.
99.
What's that?
82.
82. All right. We're going to listen on port 82. Hopefully nothing is there. And whenever we are done and ready to go, it's going to say console.log listening on port 82. I guess I just listen. All right. Now let's run our server that is not going to work very well. Clear. All right, Node basic server. Look at that. It's something stupid. I wonder if something's running on this port. Let's do a different one.
99. Take it up to 24.
Okay, good. We're doing better now. Thank you.
So the reason for that is on a Unix system, both below 1024 requires user access.
Awesome. I did not know that. Thank you. Below 1024.
Below 1024 means you gotta run at an elevated privilege.
Okay. I'm going to blame you.
I was going to say 80-80, but I just
80
wanted to make it shorter, so I appreciate it.
Sure. All right. So let me update my console log here. I always use port numbers, so I've actually never run into that. Big port numbers, so I've never run into that before. Okay, so now we have a server. This is where Charles is going to be very interesting. Now, Charles is an HTTP proxy. This will allow me to use the web server to talk to this so we can see that everything, what all is going across the wire. So, go, don't need that guy anymore. So, localhost. All right, so we've made this request. Now, go to Charles. We're going to see it. Now, what's going on with this request? Look at the status. Waiting for a response. All right? Nothing. Well, something. What I have done is I basically made a request to a Node server that will never return. It doesn't by default, end this connection. It's just not doing anything. So what I can do is I can just say that. So kill it, start it again. There we go. We have now made a request. It did in fact succeed, but it gave us absolutely nothing. So let's talk about how to do that. All right, so first of all, in the response object, this is of course where you're going to be writing the response after the stream to send back to the client. Okay? So we can write some headers and whatnot. So we can say write head, give it a code, and we could say like content type text HTML, for example. And then we could say write hello everyone. And then we could end the response. And this should be a much more satisfying web server, unless you do something stupid, which is that. Okay. So what I'm passing in here is a JSON object where the content type is your key and there's your value. Each one of the objects in here are going to become a header. And so that's what's happening when you do write head. You're writing out the header. Then when you start doing write, you're going to be writing out the body of the response. And then of course end is when you are done. So now let's go here. Can everybody see that, or is that too small?
Small.
Too small. Snap. My folder name is way too long. If I knew Unix, I'd probably know a way of, shortening that or something. I'm actually a relatively young Mac person. And I mean that both in terms of age and experience.
And you like it, don't you?
I do. Cool. Best computer I've had. All right, so we have a server going. There it is. There's the console log I was looking for. Okay. There we go. All right, isn't that fun? So in this request, this is the one we made earlier. You see what this is what you got in the response headers. We look at now what we did. We got a little bit more, and of course, most importantly, we got a little bit of a response. All right, so that's cool and all, but I don't want to write in JavaScript every bit of HTML that I'm going to return to the web server, unless you're making a single page app, and you are doing that anyway. So let's get a file. All right, let's use the same things we did whenever we read a file a second ago. We do this right. So let's see. Let's go ahead and start and look at this one. So we're in the same folder here. Let's make a folder. And I'm naming this public specifically because we're going to be using a web framework here in a minute called Express, and it likes for some things to be in a folder called public. So let's go here. And I'm going to make a file. Let's just call it that. Something really boring like index.html. All right. Here's that folder we created. Here's that file. Here it is. HTML. Because the browser can probably handle it, let's just go ahead and say something here that is not valid English or HTML. All right. Index.html. All right, cool. So let's go back to basic server and get that. So whenever a request is made, regardless of the path, let's do this. We already got our file system in here on line 1. See that? Okay. We're going to say file system, read file. We're not going to do this. This is ebuild. Okay? Because we would be blocking the thread whenever the request comes. Not that. So we're going to do that right there. And let's do this. I think this is going to blow up, and that'll be awesome. All right, so I'm going to read this file, and I'm going to get just like before, my encoding. Okay, and it's going to be UTF-8. All right, and then I'm going to have a callback. And what you're going to generally find in a lot of your callbacks for Node, your first parameter is going to be error. Your second being, for example, the data that you were going to go get. So let's do this. Let's not respond until we've gotten that. Now I'm going to assume right now that this is going to work. I don't actually think this is going to work. Let's do this. Let's say data. Just write this out. All right? Everybody ready to see this? What do you think is going to happen? I've already told you I don't think it's going to work, so maybe I'm biasing you. Oh snap. Big surprise, didn't work. Okay. First argument must be a string or a buffer. This seemingly nonsensical thing actually makes sense. So let's look and see what we have. Press this again. All right, so now we have the once again error, but we've actually printed out something to the screen, which would be useful. I did a console log right here, and first I logged error, and then I logged data string, and then the data that came back to fine. Well, the path I sent in was wrong, so therefore there was an error, and therefore I sent undefined into that other bit. Welcome. And therefore it got angry at me because it wanted a string or buffer, and I did not give that to him. I gave him an undefined. So that's what error handling looks like in Node. At least whenever you make a call and some error comes back, this is what you're going to be expecting. You're going to be looking in the error. So let's do this. If error, all right, else. If we're not in an error scenario, let's do this. In this case, the file doesn't exist, so let's write out a 404. Be done with that. So let's see our 404. Our web server did not crash this time because I'm not handling an error. If we go find this in Charles, which for some reason is a picture, we see we got a 404. But if we decide to not fail and actually get our path right, restart the server. Let's see, let's go to here. Then we have our page that we have. All right. So this brings up another thing I want to talk about in regards to Node. If you don't catch errors with Node, it's going to crash by default because it's process. So what you're generally going to want to do is you're going to want to catch errors. And sometimes you're going to want to work within some sort of provider or some other framework that will catch errors and restart the service for you if there are catastrophic problems. Like for example, if you were to take this and put this on Heroku, okay, and an error is thrown, your website is not going to be forever down after that point because Heroku is going to see that and restart your server. Now, of course, the best thing to do is handle errors, not just let your web server crash. Letting your web server crash anytime there's a small problem is not the best way to make highly available, highly performant web servers. But when you're in development, that's what you're going to have. Now, another thing that's interesting about running this in development mode is you've probably noticed whenever I make a change to the server code, I then kill the process, Control-C it, and then start it over again. And the reason why is by default, it's loading up that JavaScript file and not going back to that JavaScript file whenever I make changes. There are libraries for doing that. And so that'll basically do a file watcher on the file. When they see the file, we'll restart the server and get immediate changes. So all of those problems are actually very easily solved within the Node community. This is just a very, very basic example of how this would work. Now, what we could do with this is we can then start looking at things like what's the path that's coming out on a request, and start putting all these files in this public folder and start serving those out. You can do that. You can also then start serving the favicon. If you look at Charles, Chrome is asking for the favicon. I wasn't asking for it, but Chrome was. You can start handling all of that. Or instead of doing that, you can use something else that'll do a lot of this heavy lifting for you. Now, if you're making a pure API, you might want to use something called Restify. That's something I've been using for this project I've been working on at work. I like it. It's great. It's not for making web servers. It's for making API servers. It's on the web, but it's not for serving HTML and images and whatnot. The biggest project in the web community, if you want to do a basic MVC-ish style website, is to use something called Express. So let's get started in that direction instead of using this hokey file service we have right now. All right? Who's used Express? Anybody? Okay, 4, 5 of you. With Express, you can of course do websites, and also you can create an API. That's very doable within Express, and so that's what we're going to start with today, and start doing a very basic API, which next time we'll expand, probably using more Restify than Express. But, so let's get started with this. So, all right, so we'll name the next one Better Server.js, so that at least fit on one line. We'll make it one step smaller. Oh, look at that. I named that horribly. So let's take a look at this. Better Server.js. All right. Once again, we're going to do this. This is how you bring in modules for Express. All right. Now, Express is not a built-in module for Node. It's a third-party module for Node. So we're going to need to install this. So before we install this, or before we run this, let's do that. Now, we see our files here. So let's do this first of all. Let's go to Finder, presentations. Here it is. Package manager for Ruby is what? Ruby Gems, right? If you're a .NET guy, it's Python. No idea. It is the Python guy.
PIP.
pip. Okay. For Node, it's called npm. All right. This is not it. Big surprise. Probably npmj. s.org. Oh goodness. It's close. Awfully close. npm. When you install Node, you get npm, so you don't have to install this again. Here's the npm website. Nothing more I want to share there. That's just where it is if you want to take a look at things. And okay, something that would be useful is you can do stuff like static files. And so here's various different projects you can use for serving stuff like static files like we were just doing instead of doing the manual code that I was writing. npm can be very useful for that for doing searching. Of course, Google works well too. So let's see, do we have this open yet? We have this. All right, so we need Express. Here's basically how it works. You can say npm install Express. Whoa, okay, so here's what's going on. Whenever I say install Express, what it's doing is, of course, getting out, going and getting Express. And then what it's saying, okay, Express, what are the things that you use? Because it uses libraries. So it uses apparently accepts and parse URL. And then it's going to go to those and say, well, what do you need? And pull those down. And so a big recursive process to pull everything down that Node needs. That Express needs. So if we go back to Finder, we now have this folder called Node Modules, right? This was created when I did the npm install. So there's Express. There's my one cool dependency that has a billion other dependencies. Now it has inside of it Node Modules, and inside of there are other projects, some of which contain Node Modules, and so on and so forth. So when you do an install, it takes care of, with npm, it takes care of getting all that stuff for you, and puts it in a nice Node location. That's pretty cool. But let's do something slightly different. Let's do a new file called package.js. So we're going to do this. Let's see. Now, I have no idea what version of Express we want, so let's do this. I'll show this over here. Hey, there it is. It's an inspired web framework, which is slow, and apparently on version 4.3.1, which is what we need. All right, so we can go in here. By here, I mean here. I could say 4.3.1. And can't handle having inconsistent quotes. It's not how I roll. So we'll fix that. Okay. Package.json. So the package.json is very useful. This means you can say, here, because we no longer have a Node module folder, you can say npm install. All those are actually required? Let's say it isn't so. All right, let's do this. Here's the thing. I've got this other Node thing somewhere. Right, close your eyes. No peeking. Are you peeking? You're peeking. All right, let's paste this. Keep both. No, replace it. All right. I've now magically replaced it. Oh my gosh. Also doesn't have it. All right. So once again, go get some water. I'm joking. Don't go to get some water. Okay. I don't have packages files. Let's do this. Has everybody done a presentation where you forget to do something? Say it isn't true to Mike. Did I close this? Okay, package JSON format. So this is a nice format if you've actually got the right version that you need. Come on, give me an example. Name version.
There you go. Just
What do you
do
think?
npm install express -s save -dev.
That'll
As
do it
long
for
as
me?
you have your package file, it should do.
Alright. Thank you. Oh, am I in the right folder?
I feel like.
You know, I'm gonna try not to be disappointed in you, because I'm mostly disappointed in myself. Hey, look at that. Look, they're even using Express. All right. Break time over. Oh my gosh. Now I don't even remember what version number that was on.
431.
431? Oh my gosh. It's horrible. Mike, fire me now. All right. I did update it, right? No description field. You know what I should have done a second ago? That. Surely this is not actually required. Oh, you know what? I know where one is.
You can also just do npm init. It'll create your file for you.
Let me go ahead and mute this guy.
Oh, it's package.json. Not package.js.
It is package.json.
Okay.
Here's what I'm going to do. Package. Oh gosh. Look at this. I'm going to go to GitHub. I'm going to go here. And I'm going to go to search. I'm going to find Express. And you know what Express is going to have? A package.json file. Oh my gosh, why didn't you guys think of this before? Okay, you see all this? We don't need hardly any of that. But you know what? I'm going to take it all. Because, you know, at some point you get desperate. Did it actually put in all its formatting? Okay, so we don't need the contributors of Express, even though we're using Express.
As long as you have a package.json, npm install express -s save -dev will fill it all in. That's
All right.
I just did it.
Thank you. I'm going to give you $5. What was the other?
-s save -dev, no space. You still got a space there. Space.
That?
Yeah.
You sure? You said you just tried this.
I just did it. I got it.
I believed you.
You still have your package.json in your directory?
Try the npm init you mentioned. I think that might get you there.
I love this play.
And then just hit enter until he stops asking. You're taking defaults there.
All right. Any guesses? Oh my gosh, look at all that stuff in there. Okay. I didn't know to put Express. It's unnecessary, but I'm going to leave it. Okay. So let's do this. Just so we can see this in action. All right, so we've already added that one. So let's do another one that we're going to add later, just to give you one more possibility of me failing miserably. All right? Because, my gosh, who doesn't want to see that? Restify 2.8.1. Boom! Watch this. And now this is going. The amazingness of this is going to erase the last 5 minutes from your mind. You'll never remember that again. Is that true? Okay. Prepare to witness. I'm in the right folder, right? Magic! Boom. Okay. So I didn't specify at that point npm install restify. Now what should have happened 5 minutes ago, whenever I did this the first time, what should have happened is it should have done this right here. Now this is useful because, let's say you're taking over or working on a project with a coworker of yours and he's working on Node. All right, so what he does is he starts this little project, and you get this project and you're like, okay, start. And you say node server, and boom, it explodes because some of the dependencies aren't there. So what does this guy do? Does he go hunting through all of your files to see all the dependencies that were used in his projects? Because you don't generally check in the node_modules file. It's a bad idea. You don't do that. What they do is they put it in a package.json file, and then just run npm install on that, and they get up to date. And so they're both working on this thing, and so he decides to add this other project to it. So he goes into the package.json file, adds this other third-party library to it, saves it, pushes it to the repository. The other guy gets it, runs npm install, and boom, now he's up to date. So the package.json file ultimately is the thing that's going to just basically tell it how, all of its ultimate dependencies. And you can do a lot more with a package.json file as well. You can use it, especially with a lot of cloud hosts, to run scripts and whatnot whenever you're hosting. But that's all we're going to do here, because after all, one can only handle so much fail when talking about a single topic in the presentation. Okay, so that's npm. Now let's get back to where we were.
Silly question. Where does
Yes.
that file live? That package.json file is it in your directory where you're putting your source code for the server?
Yes, it does. So it's actually sitting in the root. So if we look here, it's sitting here in the root, and whenever you go node modules, now watch this not work. This actually really should. So I nuked the node modules. So now it's like whenever I get this from source control without anything. So then I go in, I can say npm install, and it goes and installs everything. Creates the node package for it, puts everything. So yeah, it's separate.
So if you have a new project, let's say you create a new folder for a new website, and you need to do this thing again, you install the root file, wherever that server is.
Yeah, any new project, you're going to generally want to create a package.json file and have that manage your dependencies. I didn't think of something. You're going to think I'm an idiot for not thinking about this, but if you look here in node modules, then you look at Express. See, it has a package.json file. I could use that one. Or I could use the one in here. Or the one in here. Or the one in here. Or the one in here.
But wouldn't that just have the dependencies downstream from that, not necessarily upstream?
Yes, it would. But I could have used that as my example instead of going hunting for 5 minutes and wasting your valuable time. But I just thought about that. It would have been really nice to think about that, a few minutes ago. Anyway, moving on. Okay, we're in the world of Sublime text scale. Here it is. That's Sublime. So in our better server, we're going to use Express. Now Express is extending essentially the HTTP stuff. So we're going to say var server equals Express. I think create just Express. All right, so this is going to be our server. And way down here, we're going to do a server dot listen once again on what was our port?
Yeah, 10.8.20, I think.
10.8.20. Listen 10.8.20. Okay, so let's run this. Just see if our dependencies are in order. So we need node better server. We're good. I don't have anything defined in it. It's just now a server that doesn't do anything, so this doesn't do us much good. But at least we know the dependencies are there, and we basically work. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and define our first API, shall we? Okay. Very simple, basic JSON stuff, okay? So we're going to say whenever someone does a get to this particular URL, the URL being API/something, the colon there is because it's a variable. what I want to do is I want to get this, and I want to do something with it. I want to return some JSON from this guy. And I want to say it's a 200, and then I want to say data is going to be the request.params. All right, let's see if that works. Better server is now listing here. Let's go to our name. Give me a name.
Fred.
Fred. Cannot get name Fred.
API.
Well, yeah. Did I just do API? It's actually, yeah, it is right. There's no name to it. Okay, there we go. You do have to get the path right. Yep. Okay, so you see what we've done there? So instead of doing any manual parsing of files, it does what you're going to get in a lot of other frameworks, where it's basically going to do this parsing of these paths for you. And so this is saying, like I said, whenever somebody does a get, as opposed to a post or delete or something like that, whenever somebody does a get to API/something, whatever is after an API becomes a variable. It is now going to be in the params. All right, and this was named, so therefore this is named. If this was age, then this would be age. And so return it then as JSON, and with a code 200. That make sense? Let's do a static file. So what you do with Express is you're going to, first of all, tell it to start serving static files. So I do something like this. I say server.use express.static. And so this tells us the directory that we're running. And then we're going to say plus, we set this up, right? All right. So now what I can do is I can now just serve static files out of that. So let's restart this, go there, and now there's our browser, and then we get our bad English and bad HTML, but it now gets served up. I don't have to go manually read the file, right? Express is going to do that for me, and I get a much more compact little web server here. Make sense? So it's really nice to put something like this. Now, what you probably need, if you're running websites, you're probably going to want to do some sort of server-side generation of things. And so what you can do is you can use different packages for doing rendering. Now, in the ASP.NET world, for a very long time, most everybody used something that we later called the Web Form View Engine, a particular way of mixing HTML and non-HTML, variables and whatnot. So whenever the page is rendered, it takes all that and it makes it into actual HTML and returns it. Then later on with ASP.NET, you've got another option for that. With lots of other web frameworks, you're used to one or multiple options for doing this. Node does not ship with one. Express ships with one. I don't like it. So we're going to use a different one. So let's go once again to the dreaded file. See, now I'm even afraid to open this thing. I'm going to have nightmares tonight just because of this. I kind of like this one. Jade seems weird to me, so I'm going to go with this one. And it's version 1.0.0. Whoa. Okay. A coincidence? I think not. So EJS 0.0. Now watch this. You're not going to expect this to work. But you know what's going to happen? It's going to work. So now I've added that to my package.json file. Now when anybody gets it, they can just run npm install and we're going to get everything. So that's nice. So I've got EJS all installed and all that goodness. So now I need to tell my server that I'm going to start using EJS, first of all. Equals require EJS. All right, now I need to tell Express what I want it to do. So I'm going to say server.set view engine EJS. S. All right. Now, we'll do this. Let's see. Get foo. We're gonna have a page called foo. Doesn't that sound good? Like the other one, it's going to do a whole request response thing. And what I want to do is I want to do a response.render. Let's call it foo page. Why not? Right? And then let's pass in some variables. So give me a variable name, somebody. A noun. Anybody know any nouns?
Cat.
What?
Cat.
Cat. Fantastic. What's the name of your cat? I'm assuming you have a cat.
I don't. Fluffy.
I also don't have a cat. I'm a fish, and they're not fluffy. Okay, so foo. All right, so here's what we need. Foo. Let's go here and just see, because you're used to seeing things spectacularly fail. Oh my gosh, not that one. That. Let's see it happen again, except this time it's on purpose, I promise. Failed lookup view, foo page, and views directory. So the way this generally works, the way Express works, is it has a directory. It's going to look for whatever your dynamic views are. It's going to look in that directory for those. So here we are. We're going to say, where are we? Make dir views. All right. So in views, let's create a file. Foo page. I think that's what I called it. Let's give it an EJS extension. Views. There it is. Let's make another invalid HTML page, because that's what you do in an HTML5 user group. Create invalid HTML. Very sad. But I have a cat. Nice cat called cat. Switch here. And eat my package JSON. Okay. Boom! Look at that. Called Fluffy. Cheer me up. And eat my package JSON file. You know what would be better than this though? If you could personalize this for your own cat. Somebody who has a cat, tell me your cat's name. Anybody here have a cat? Dante? Fantastic choice. All right, so in theory, I'm going to take the request, be able to pull that out right there. Dante. Okay, well, we need to go back because this is how we roll. Okay. Hey, Dante. It's right there. Okay, so cool. All right. So now with Express, we have dynamic pages. And so, you're passing an object. He succeeded. I hope you all saw that. We now have dynamic pages. Basically, you've got variables here in your EJS that you can now pass in JSON objects. And of course, you can get, where do you get those JSON objects? Wherever you want to. You get the data from the database, you get the data from parameters, you can do whatever you want and generate your dynamic pages. So with EJS, we've seen static pages and dynamic pages and making basic JSON runs. All right? Yes?
What's the default on the substitution? Like you said, percent equal. I've been with a .NET background. I highly advise people against using percent equals because it's not encoded. So is the default to encode the output?
I don't know. You want to find out?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Script like that, right?
All right. Anybody want to take a vote?